I call this program, It's Not Bragging If It's a Fact. What are the most difficult things to answer when it comes to an interview question? What's your greatest accomplishment? So I'm going to ask you in 1 minute or less to write down your 3 greatest accomplishments. Go. All right, your minute's up. Pens down. I saw pens that weren't moving. I saw eyes that were this wide. I saw people do this. Why did I ask you to do that, and why did I put a 1 minute time frame on it?
Because that's what interviewers are looking for.
What are interviewers looking for?
The ability to think quickly on your feet.
Bullet number 2? Oh, no. Just kidding. Interviewers are looking for confidence more than the perfect answer. And if you give someone just a little bit of a break in confidence, I now have some questions about your ability to deal with pressure, or your ability to go with the flow, or your ability to be adaptable and nimble to the environment you're in. Are you surprised that the most difficult question out there is, what's your greatest accomplishment? Can you talk about me? Because that's really what it is. The last time we were together a couple weeks ago, did I tell you I was going up to Canada for a Toastmasters program? For table topics, I was in the contest. I represented the state of Maine. I won. I'm the district champion. Now I'll ask you the question, did I just brag? No. Yes, no, me. It's a fact. It fit to the context of talking about yourself. I don't run up and down the street saying, look at me, I won. But what it does is something that I wouldn't have been able to do years ago. And that's to talk about myself. So if I was to say I was a great communicator, I was a great leader, I was a great influencer, all of these things, I haven't told you anything yet. But when I start talking about the facts of, I was promoted, I did achieve my incentive X number of months in a row, I was Toastmaster of the Year. These are facts. These are facts that I can write down on paper and be very proud of. If you were to ask me what my greatest accomplishment was, it will change every 5 minutes. For those that were able to get 3 down on paper, flip them upside down. Flip them sideways. Does it matter which one you give first? No. Because it's whatever's important to you. It is your pride that is out there. So when someone comes out and says, tell me, if you had to be a tree, what tree would you be? The looks on your faces right now. Go ahead and give me a tree.
Palm tree.
Maple, oak, what else?
Palm.
Redwood, palm, nice. Ficus.
They're flexible and they don't break.
The look on your face. Again, you have to understand, interviewers are not necessarily always out to test you. But you have to go in with the full-blown spectrum of, people are going to come in and try to surprise me. People may try to throw you off. That's not necessarily the intent of most interviewers. But if you put yourself into that position as if it could potentially happen, then when the surprise comes, you won't be surprised. So the questions about maples or oaks or palms, you should always answer the question, whether it was asked or not. Did I ask you to tell me the tree and why? Did I say and why? And when I don't, I typically get a one-word answer. Unless it's red oak. You have to answer that anyway, whether it is asked or not. Always give supporting information. I'm not looking for a one-word answer. I may just have neglected to say why, but I'm really looking to understand why. And it should be an answer with confidence that talks about you and how it relates to you. I could be any tree in the world, and I can have you tell me the tree, and I'd still be able to answer it for you. Because there should be a confidence behind it that exudes through me that tells you, here's the type of tree I am. I'm an oak because I want to stand strong. I can have a strong root system. I have loyalty to this company. I've been here for 22 years. But I'd like to branch out and help others. In the midst of turmoil and storms, I can stand straight and tall and be there for you. A weeping willow. Vulnerable enough to share my mistakes and lessons learned with others. Can ebb and flow with the constant changes of the business model. I asked the same question of some high school seniors. And one came out and said, Christmas tree. Christmas tree? Would you really want to label that? And they said, absolutely. It's festive. It brings a smile to everyone's face. It's decorated. And they gave a good, solid reason behind it. The person next to him said, that'd be a cactus. And all their friends were whispering, is that a tree? And he said, I'm prickly. I'm protective. I stay close to myself. But I can survive with just the smallest amount. And I looked at him and I knew instantly he was an independent thinker. He was creative, somewhat introverted and liked to hang out by himself, but probably in a role that could be an independent type contributor to a company. Maybe not necessarily the team player you want, but it became very instant in my thinking of what, as he described himself. It was creative. Why not? I don't care if it's a tree or not. So I was reading about interviewing about a year or so ago, and I came across some questions that were actually asked in an interview. The first is, if you were a superhero, who would it be and why? Anybody? Now let's take it. Superman can fly. Tie it into something that you can grab hold of. Flying will not help you on the job, unless, of course, you're looking to become a pilot.
As far as moving through the company, flying.
Okay.
Soaring.
Okay.
Exactly.
Absolutely. But do you see how I'm starting to edge it into something that's a little bit more? I saw a hand in the back.
I would say Batman because he doesn't have any special powers, but he's a hero to most because he's independent and he stands out.
Okay. And you may even, depending on the job that's out there, he does a lot of things in the background. All you have to do is ask and the job will get done. Put that light up there, and he does it in this stealth mode with quality. Do you see how you're starting to connect these dots to a job that you're interviewing for? So it's not just, I was just caught off guard, now I need to be confident. It's, can I weave that story? Can I bring it in? The second question. If every time you entered a room, what would your theme song be? And why?
Jeopardy song.
Okay.
You never know what's going to happen.
It's funny, it's creative. There's this awkward silence right now. Will that happen for real in an interview? Will you have that silence? Will you have that pause? Is that okay? Do I have to be talking all the time? No. But you can transition it effectively and say, let me think about it. Interesting question. Throw a little chuckle in there. An interview is a two-way discussion. It is not Q&A, It's not I sit there and wait for your question and then answer it. Do you have control in an interview to dictate how it moves? Some. Not all. But in the Q&A portion, I don't want you answering in a way that you think the interviewer wants it answered. But you have the ability to tack on the whys, the supporting information. See, that was really interesting. Let me tell you a little bit more about this. Or let me give you an example where I had to do something like that. Now you can add on. You want to be clear and concise, but also enough support that someone gets it. So a few weeks ago, I had an interview over the phone with someone. And I simply asked the question, tell me a little bit about yourself professionally. And then I hit mute. 20 minutes later, I could have interrupted, but why? Why should I do all the work as the interviewer? Why do I have to cut you off if you're a rambler? I need to know if you can communicate concisely, succinctly. Why should I leave that question in my mind as to whether you can do that effectively or not? I'm just going to let you go. There's an opportunity to be clear and concise. I had you write down your 3 accomplishments. That is the start of your elevator speech. What is an elevator speech?
Time it takes to get from the bottom of the elevator to where you're going, to be able to present your case and have the person buy it before you get out.
You love it. It's a short, concise, you don't have a lot of time, but you have to get a lot of information out there at once about you. So start to jot down. I will never have you memorize an answer. I will never have you say, I have to be an oak because I'm going to get that question someday. And then it just fills your head with junk. But when it comes to understanding you, there's nobody who should know you better than you. You just have to be able to communicate about you effectively. So think about it in a 2-minute elevator ride with someone, and you have to give them all the merits and accomplishments and things that you can do for them. Would you be able to do it? And if the answer is I'm not sure or I don't know, that's okay. Because now you have an opportunity to start thinking about that. Because in reality, that's what it is. Your first impression, your first couple minutes of an interview could set the tone for that decision that's being made. As an interviewer, my confidence level within my first 2 minutes of the interview on what decision I'm going to make is probably about 95%. It only gets supported along the way. Every once in a while, I might be wrong because maybe they were nervous and finally got themselves comfortable. But in reality, your first impression is going to set the tone for the rest of the interview. Confidence right off the bat. The fact that you can communicate your 2 minutes with your key accomplishments. And someone says, tell me a little bit about yourself professionally. You can go in to not some diatribe that goes on for hours, but a very quick and concise explanation of who you are that differentiates you from everyone else that's out there. So your 2 minutes shouldn't be something along the lines of, yeah, I've collected accounts, I've been with the company for this long, are you looking for anything else? It's whatever you've done. Now I can say I've been with the company for 22 years, I've been in a variety of roles which includes administrative management. I started on the phones. I've had a lot of success when I was on the phones. I've been in fraud, risk, customer service. I've been in multiple roles. I've been heavily involved in Toastmasters, which has helped me to improve my communication skills. I've had some success in some of the contests that are out there. On the administrative side, I've learned about business. I have my 6 Sigma Green Belt. Business support. All of that slowed down. I kind of rushed through it intentionally. Slowed down can start to tell you who I am overall professionally. when you answer that question, think of yourself as the whole as well. If you have some volunteer activities that help with some of the work that you do, that makes you who you are and gives you the skills, I don't care if you're paid for it or not. If you've ever put together a golf tournament, if you ever have gone and organized events for the Special Olympics, that shows patience, people skills. I don't care if you were paid for it or not. If that makes you as a whole, make sure that's part of your elevators. Volunteer activity, extracurricular activities. If you do stuff on the side, you're a landlord, any one of those can be part of who you are. Don't let it get caught up in, here's my last 5 years of my life and that's who I am. No, it's not. You are the whole. So I'll ask you another question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how weird are you? And why? You don't necessarily have to answer that one. Unless you want to. If you saw somebody steal a quarter, would you report it? If not, at what dollar amount would you report it? Now what am I trying to get to?
Integrity.
What do you consider stealing?
But I haven't touched upon your accomplishments or anything yet. How could that tell me about you?
You could relate it to a specific example.
So maybe it's an opportunity for you to show where your ethics were questioned and how you rose above that. Think creatively, think quickly. These are the things we're looking for. Because deep down inside your heart and your head, you're probably not going to change how you would react to something even a little bit bigger than that. You should prepare for what are called behavioral-based interview questions. Situational-based or behavioral-based questions are, tell me a time when you didn't get along with a teammate. Tell me about a time where you had to deal with a difficult customer situation. Tell me a time when, ... Because that brings us to who you were in the past. Because what that will do is tell me, for the most part, what you're going to do in the future. Do you see how those tie in together? Because a leopard typically doesn't change its spots. If you said, well, there was just this teammate, she was getting on my nerves. She would constantly cut me off. She never listens to me. And it's always about her. What have I just told you? If that was my answer. And by the way, that's a real story.
Doesn't sound like you dealt with it, you just put up with it.
I haven't told you anything except what the problem was. So now I'm starting to tell you a story of, am I a problem dumper, a problem solver, am I willing to fix it? Now let's continue this story. I thought maybe it was us just trying to figure out our styles and our personalities a little bit. But I realized after a while it was just her style. But instead of accepting it, because of what I found is the meetings weren't productive when it was just the two of us or in a group setting. I had a conversation with her. And I said, all that I ask when we talk is, I'm hoping that you can listen to me and allow me to finish my thoughts. Do what you can not to interrupt me. And I'll show you the same respect. And I think it's important that we figure out where our team connection points are, because I think the only way we're going to succeed as a collective group is with the two of us working together. We had a face-to-face the other day. was as if the conversation never took place because it sunk in. It resonated with them. We had our mutual figure it out together. And now we were working fantastic together last week. There wasn't any hard feelings because there was this respect we gained from each other for being strong enough to have that conversation and strong enough to take that gift of feedback. So now in that example, I'm the problem solver. Vulnerable enough to figure out that I need to do something about it, and strong enough to actually do something about it. It should tell you how I will react in the future to those types of situations. It's going to tell me whether you get along with people or not. It's going to tell me whether you are, after a couple of these types of questions, you're going to start to figure out, are you a team player? Are you independent in your thinking? Would you rather just be off on your own? When it comes to dealing with difficult customer situations, are you one that just dumps into your manager the whole time or sticks to the policies and procedures? Because I'll continue to ask questions based off of the answers that you gave me. So I might say, you say, well, I have to figure out what the policy and procedure tells me to do. And I say, so you will only stick to the policy and procedures? What happens if it's outside of that box? Now how do you do it? We'll continue to stretch that as the interviewer to see how creative and how far outside that box you will go. How you've dealt with these situations. This isn't hypothetical. These are giving me real live examples. Will then teach me from the past what you'll end up doing in the future. So I'll stop here. What questions or comments about what we just talked about or anything else that's on your mind about the interview process?
I don't know how to phrase it. If the interviewer says, tell me your weak spot, or where do you feel you can, obviously I don't want to say, well, I just have a hard time saying, what are my weaknesses and how would I resolve that?
I'm going to count to 3. And on 3, I want you to write down your biggest weakness. You don't have to share it with anyone. 1, 2, 3. I'll answer your question. Just give me a second. Now to the right of that word or phrase, write why it's a strength of yours. Nobody has a weakness. None of us have a weakness. Trust me, if we did, I'd have plenty of them. But we're all working to improve ourselves in something. None of us are perfect. So I lump them all together, and well, if you have to have all weaknesses, then you don't have any. So when someone asks you the question relating to weaknesses, they should really be your strengths. So figure out what your 3 strengths are, and you know what your 3 weaknesses are, because now what you can talk about is the things that you've done to get to the point to make them a strength. My biggest weakness is my communication skills. I was told for 20 years that I can't communicate. I was a communication major in college. For 20 years on my performance appraisal, it said you need to do something about your communication. So I finally joined Toastmasters. I went back and I reread 20 years worth of performance appraisals and wrote down all of the things that related to communication. And I started to take the actions to improve it, and I now could consider it a strength. And let me explain why. When someone says, give me 3 weaknesses, I want to see how quickly they come out of your mouth. I want to see if they're going to hold you back. Yeah, it's a test. It's a big test. And it's a question that's coming out to say, how quickly can you put it out there? My father was a personnel director at Sears Roebuck & Company for 25 years. I've been mock interviewed more times than I like to count. And the question I remember most, the last question I ever had in a mock interview with him, he said, give me your 3 weaknesses. And I went, check, 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 and here's 4 more because I have so many of them. And it became a checklist of, here they are, therefore these are all my faults, and now you get to make a judgment of it. No. What I'm doing now is I'm making the judgment of myself. Because isn't it the same thing as your greatest accomplishment? Your greatest weakness is your greatest accomplishment, and what are you doing to get through it? To muscle by it? To not let it hold you back? That's a pretty decent accomplishment. So if you're looking at this weakness as this thing that's going to hold you back in this interview, and I don't want to put it out there on the table, I'd say you put it out there and put it out there firmly as a strength. So when it comes to weaknesses, I might throw out communication skills. I might put out there that I was constantly driving towards numbers and it impacted my ability to relate to people. I never missed a number. So it tells you I'm performance driven. But what I found is that instead of being so forceful to get to the numbers, what I did is I learned to get to the back and provide a little bit more support and encouragement. My satisfaction levels went up with my associates. My morale went up. So did my performance. So I found a flexible way to hit numbers, and now I have found a nice balance of I hold people accountable, but I also know that they want to do it for the right reasons. So I know how to motivate and hold people accountable. That's a second weakness that has grown into a strength. If you're struggling with this in your head right now, go down and write your 3 weaknesses and say, are they weaknesses or strengths? And if your answers are, they are weaknesses, and you can't find a strength, don't say it. Find 3 strengths. Nobody's going to sit there and reach into your head and pull out the answers you're thinking about but don't want to put on the table. This isn't about manipulating the interview. This is about putting yourself out there in the best light, because guess what? It's an interview and I want you in your best light. One of my close friends was an HR director for years. Described the interview as a first date. You're going to give the best you have. You're going to dress up nice. You're going to be on your best behavior on this date, because after that first date, it all goes downhill. Same thing with the interview. I'm going to give you everything and give you this, and if I, the interviewer, think you are average, and that's the best you can give me, I've got questions. Don't leave me with questions. And it's not about dressing up. Don't misinterpret that. But why should anyone tell you you have to put a tie on for an interview? Am I going to make a decision based off of a tie? No. But are you leaving questions in my mind about you as a whole? Probably. Which will lead me down a path of questions that will say, are you giving me your best? And if you leave me with average, I have questions. Because if I hire you as average, I should know for a fact that if you're giving me average on day 1, day 2, and day 3, when you walk in the door, your average is only going to get lower. So that person was right. Don't give me average. Give me the best that you have. Great question. What else do you have?
I recently had an interview, and in the interview I found words coming out of my mouth, but in my head I'm saying, shh, stop talking. How do I salvage it from there? Like, I know that I had already spoke too much. Like, how do I... I'm sorry, I'm just going to stop talking now. Next question, please.
I do dumb things all the time. I say stupid things all the time. It happens. Welcome to reality. Get a kick out of it. Enjoy it. Do me something. Do yourself a favor. Don't ever apologize. And what I mean by that is, I'm sorry, I'm just not on my game today. I'm sorry I didn't sleep well last night. I'm sorry I just had so many things that were going on. My head's just spinning right now. Or so nervous today. I'm sorry, I'm just nervous. I can't get the right answers to you. Every apology I make knocks my credibility down a notch. I've had people, all of those examples I just gave are live. They have been said to me within the last 4 months worth in interviews. Someone say, oh, I'm sorry, I've been going on forever. Do you have another question? The apology threw me. What you might want to say is, well, this might be a good time to wrap it up, and I'll just finish by saying, and I was able to achieve my goal. Make sure that they understand you're bringing it to conclusion. Don't take it to a hard stop. Don't slam on the brakes and then all of a sudden I'm figuring out did you answer the question? It's not some deer running out in front of your car and all of a sudden you're slamming on. Slow it down. Treat it as a stop sign and say, all right, I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to bring it to a nice conclusion. You'll have some fallbacks that you're going to have some mistakes that were made in an interview. They happen to everybody. So how do you sit in an interview? Sit the way you want to sit in an interview. You don't have to stay this way for 30 minutes. However you're comfortable. Except just don't slouch. Make yourself as comfortable as possible, because in order for you to banish your nerves, you have to be in a comfortable zone for yourself. And if you're uptight, leaning against the desk like this, right up front, you're tense, your shoulders are tense, it's very obvious, it comes out in your face. Make yourself comfortable. I found a very comfortable position where I just put my knee up on my leg. I just sit there. I'm not slouching. I'm comfortable. I'm not so relaxed as they, hey dude, what's going on? It's just, it becomes more personal in who I am. And that's one of the things that I've had to learn is how do I be me in an interview? I went to a job interview once and I sat there in a very tense position for 30 minutes and my leg fell asleep. I got up to shake their hand. And I literally fell over. I didn't get the job. But back to your question is, you can have a little bit of fun with it to say, you know, I have 7 more examples, but I think I'll turn it back over to you. Have a little fun with it. Turn it into something personal. If you're not funny, don't try to be funny. I'm not, so I don't try to be. But there have been many interviews where I tried to force humor, and it became very obvious. But if you're a naturally funny person, don't let it be held back just because it's an interview. Just have a two-way dialogue as if you're having a conversation at the Thanksgiving table with someone you haven't seen in a while. Why couldn't you? When you're asked these questions, it's also your right to ask questions back. Not the how did I do on that answer, but it might be maybe you need some clarity to it. So you ask for a little clarification. I'm sorry, could you ask that one more time? Or I'm just trying to understand, when you talk about a little bit about myself, are you talking personal or professional? Might be a question you might ask. Or you might say, that's an interesting question you had about that customer situation. Have you ever found yourself in one of those situations yourself? I'm not turning some chair around to the interviewer and saying, ha, I've got you. I'm not testing the interviewer. I'm just like I would having a conversation with my wife or a friend, is I'd love to know what your opinion is. I'd love to know what's going on in your head. I'd love to use your expertise or your experience. Why shouldn't I? It should be a learning experience for both of you. So make it a two-way dialogue as much as you possibly can. What other questions?
the best way to follow up on an interview? Like at the end of the note, say I'll call you. Should you say call like a couple days later and just say I'm following up? On a meeting, email?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's just like that first date thing. Did you get their number? You have to figure out, did you establish a relationship with that person? When they made that comment at the end of, I'll call you or I'll write you or I'll email you, did you feel as if it was a canned piece of the interview? Or did you feel as if they were really connecting with you and said, I really will give you a call? You might during that time, because remember, this is a two-way dialogue. Hey, listen, I know we all get busy. When should I expect to hear from you? By Friday. Do you want me to call if I don't hear back from you on Friday? No, it might be a week after that because of some delays in HR. But if you don't hear back from me in 2 weeks, then go ahead and give me a call, because I've just created that secondary point of it's on my mind. You might say this job's very important to me. I'd love to be able to start immediately. What would you like? How would you like to proceed from here? Or they may say you'll get a call in a couple days from now from HR. Those types of things. You also have the pieces, because you're just talking about the follow-up of whether you're moved on or not, but you also have the piece of, do you thank them? Only if you feel like thanking them. Don't force it. I went to a speed networking event in Texas. I was there for 3 hours. I spoke to a person every 20 minutes for 3 hours, so that's 9 people. At the end of the event, I had 9 thank you cards because they were required by the organizer to do it. I felt as special committee. You start reading the 3rd and the 4th one, you say, boy, are these forced? I would love to have been that 9th person who did not send it in. And then a week later looked my name up online and sent me a note. In the speech competition, one of the guys who beat me, I went to my P.O. box and there was a card for me. Not the, I beat you. But I knew he was moving on to the next level, and I knew he could make his speech even stronger. I walked out with him and gave him a couple of bits of feedback. And he hand wrote on this thing, thank you so much for the investing in time. I can't believe I beat you. And thank you for the tips that you gave me. I remember exactly what it said, because it had so much personal meaning to it. So when you find that, if you're finding in the interview you are not getting that personal relationship with that person or that connection, is find a way to get it. So you know, etiquette will tell you you probably want a thank you note on there. It's going to help dictate what you put on there, because if everyone gives you a canned thank you note, you haven't differentiated yourself from anyone else. But in the middle of the interview, if you start talking about this two-way dialogue you and I had about this difficult situation, or I was in the middle of an interview one time and all of a sudden started talking about, well, what are some of the things you're doing to advance yourself educationally, not business related? And he said, well, I'm going to go off and take Spanish. You ought to go get your MBA. So I sent him a note back saying, hola. And then told him all the reasons why I was not going to take my MBA, get my MBA. Because I had, at the time, had been involved in this Toastmasters, I had been involved in a brand new job and a couple other things that I was working on. But I planned on using some of the same things I would have picked up at getting my MBA and investing my time and energy there. But there was an instant connection at the end of that discussion. And so I was able to send a card back that was personalized to our discussion. And I'm hoping brought a little bit of a smile on his face. I'm not going to argue whether it should be email or not. I just got a wedding invitation via email, so I know etiquette is changing with the tide. But if you are going to do it, make sure that it has something personal in it, and that there's true meaning and it's heartfelt. An interesting observation that I have, and it's Tom Dowd's own observation, is that the letters I get, or the emails I get, that are very obvious, they are not personalized, are the ones who are most desperate and probably didn't come up with a connection with me in the interview. They're the ones who are saying, oh, rats. 30 minutes went by and I made no impression. Maybe this thank you note will. That thank you note is too late. As Tom Dowd's only opinion, I've never made a decision for or against a candidate based off of a thank you note. However, it has been a very memorable experience on both sides of the fence when I have gotten it. That was heartfelt. It might be the thing that puts you over, but I would tell you, invest your time in the 30 minutes of the interview, worry about that on the back end. It's about establishing that connection and relationship, and you need to make a quick assessment as you're going through this. Am I establishing this relationship? And if the answer is I am not, the response shouldn't be, oh, rats. This isn't going well. It's, oh, man, what do I have to do to change this thing to make it go well? And make your adjustments midstream. You're going to make your mistakes, make them. But boy, isn't it very powerful when someone makes a mistake and rises above it. One of the best speeches I ever saw in a contest was someone who messed up and finished extremely strong. Now you have this mutual respect of, I get it, we all make mistakes. What are you doing in your most pressure-packed situation after you've made that mistake? That's probably the most telling piece of the entire interview. Be vulnerable enough to make the mistakes. Be vulnerable enough to be you in an interview. Don't answer the way you think it should be answered. Because now it's not you. Because now you're trying to put words in your head, and you're not using words from your background. You're not using the strengths that made you who you are, because now you're trying to figure out what this person wants. Figure out what you want in order to answer that question to the best of your ability. What other questions do you have?
Would you support going on an interview for a position that you might not necessarily be 100% interested in, just for the experience of the interview?
Yes. The question was, what if you're not 100% sure that this is what you want? You don't know it's exactly what you want until you have a two-way dialogue with someone. Because there might be something I'm interviewing for and I have to have this job. But after we get into a little bit of the Q&A, this isn't exactly what was originally described to me. What it says in a job requisition or in the paper is a lot different than when you're sitting face to face and you're talking about real day-to-day responsibilities. Think of it both ways. This is your chance to have a conversation with someone to say, is it of interest to you and is it of interest to me? It is not, please hire me because I'm sitting across the table from you. It is, please hire me because I'm a great fit for you and this is something I want. It's still a two-way street. I would absolutely do it. Worst case scenario is you get to say no. And yes, it is a yes-no question. You have the opportunity to do that. Which early in my career, I didn't realize I could do that. To actually say no to someone. Most of the no's that I've said over the last 10 years plus have led me down a better path to where I was saying yes, which actually expanded my career better, faster, more to my satisfaction. But only getting involved into the two-way conversation did I realize this is what I really wanted or really didn't want. And it's okay to say this isn't exactly as it was once described. That's interesting. Could you tell me a little bit more? Absolutely. Great question. What else?
I have a question. A lot of us have been here for more than a decade. You know, we did something totally different before, like I did social work before. I know a few resumes and such that I've sent out and talked to people on networking and constantly asked, you know, why am I looking at going from here? back there, we're doing something totally different.
Love the
Of course, I
question.
was asked the same thing when I came coming in, too, is why.
The question was, how do you tie something that doesn't have a direct alignment to what you're applying for? Or vice versa. So if you are a collector and you are applying for something in sales, just start spitting out the similarities between the two. Go ahead.
You have to sell the customer on making a payment with you over the phone.
Negotiating constantly.
So you're selling because if you can't pay everyone, can you at least pay us? You're negotiating because maybe you can't pay this entire amount. I need you to pay something. What else? Gaining rapport, building relationship with the customer, dealing with difficult situations, being persuasive, being motivational, being inspirational, being hard and holding someone accountable when they need to, accepting rejection. All of these skills can be applied right here. So if you have some social work in the past, I've had to deal with some difficult situations. I've had to deal with children. I've had to deal with dysfunctional families. Welcome to the company I work for.
Just the owner office.
You can tie all of these things together. Unless you're specifically saying, I am an accountant by trade, I want to go into an accounting business and it's very technical, or computer programming, computer science, something along those lines, where you have to have these get your hands dirty skills. There are people skills, there are leadership skills, there are communication skills, all of which can tie into plenty of jobs that are out there. And I'm glad you asked the question of, I've been here for 10 years, because everything that happened before that didn't go away. It's who you are as a whole person. Bring the stuff in that's relevant. So when you're talking about the social work, I would absolutely bring that in, because that helps you deal with people, difficult situations, thinking quickly on your feet, thinking independently, working within a system, all of which can be tied together into what you might be applying. So maybe you've been on the phones for 10 years, but it doesn't stop the fact that you still dealt with people and communicated and had to communicate effectively. So if I'm now going for maybe a teller position, I'd bring that in and say, let me tell you about some social situations I've been involved in, all of which there is a connection. Great question. What else?
Mine is a specific question. What is the right answer to, what do you like least about your current role? I always say nothing, and then they're like, then why are you applying elsewhere? I'm like, great.
It's interesting. What do you like least about the job that you're in right now? And there is a test. Yes, it is a test. And the test is, are you really leaving your job? Or do you really want to go to this job? And you ask the question, I'm going to rephrase it, because you ask the question, what is the right answer? I'm going to say there never is a perfect or a right answer. You want to answer it in a way, however, that points in the direction of, I'm really looking for this. Yes, there are some things that are driving me to apply for this job. But it should come down to facts. It is not bragging if it is a fact. And if you have the skills necessary to do this job, and you can find that connection between that job and the skills that you have, you should be able to say, I want your job because of this. Did I answer the question of what I like least about my job? No. If I get called on the carpet and they say, well, you haven't answered the question, then I'll go back and I'll answer. But in reality, I love my job. I have bad days. Trust me. But they're bad. I'll tell you a conversation I had with my manager. This is a real live conversation from Monday. I said, I'm not sure if I'm in the right role. When's the last time you had that conversation? I said, how are things going? I said, my frustration is with my own learning curve. I've had 4 jobs in 4 years. I average 18 months of position for 22 years. I know what my learning curve is, and the fact that I'm not at it after 6 months scares me. And she said, we're in the same boat. It wasn't an interview, but boy, did my respect level just go up further for my manager. It's the same thing as an interview. It's still about building a relationship. I had a strong enough trust and respect relationship built within a short period of time with that manager to be able to say, I'm not sure if I'm in the right role. My frustration or the reason why I want to leave is because maybe my learning curve, I am so methodical in how I learn that there's just so much information here, and I'm learning every single day, and I'm frustrated because I'm not coming up the learning curve as quickly as I'd like. Is there anything wrong with that? What you really want to do, just like you would with self-deprecating humor, is talk about your frustrations with yourself, not the company, not the people you're with, not your managers, not your buddy to your left, not the job. Nothing should come back to the job itself because a leopard never changes its spots. If you come out in an interview and say, well, after a while I got kind of, this job was getting a little old, I've been doing it forever, I'm going to say easily bored. So you have to be careful with the words that are coming out of your mouth and the story that's really being told. I can interpret things only the way that I, as the individual who's hearing that, can interpret it. You have to phrase it in a way that is clear and concise and in a way that reduces the amount of misinterpretation. Great question. What else? Go ahead. It's your day. It's your session.
Again, a lot of us have been here for a long time and we earn a really good income. Definitely compared to, like, for me going back into social work, and they always ask, you know, what are you looking for in salary, and what would your, it's been 12 years since I've interviewed, so what would your suggestions or tips be on that? Especially today.
Yeah, when it comes to negotiation, the worst thing you can do is put a number on the table because now I have the base. Now I know what I'm working from. In negotiations classes, they'll tell you, do everything possible in your power to not have a number come out of your mouth. Or at least have it be the first number. Have them give a number. So you might want to ask a question with a question. Well, what is your typical rate? What do you typically pay someone with 12 years worth of experience with dealing with people? Notice I didn't say who's been out of the business for 12 years. Who has 10 years worth of social experience plus another 12 years of people and dealing with difficult situation experience. What is your typical range? Well, we don't like to communicate that. Well, my salaries are absolutely negotiable, but I'd like to just continue the process and move through this. Now, it might get to a point after a while where it's just you have to put a number on the table, but I just spoke to somebody, and we spent an hour talking about negotiation skills, and they ended up coming back and they said, I have a job that was offered as $41,000. And I had one, 35, and the question they asked is they said, well, what are you currently paid now? And they gave their number. Now that number is big and certain. If it's lower than what I was going to offer, I just saved this company money. If it's so far out of the ballpark, I may not even make you an offer. It actually came in a little bit higher than they were willing to pay. And so now, all of a sudden, she's in a very difficult situation because she wants a job that's a little bit higher in pay. In fact, she said her number was 41. She wanted something along the lines of 45. They're willing to pay 35. So now her range, she can't go up to 45 with what she wants because that's now completely out of the table because now they're saying you're willing to accept 41. So you have to be willing to not put numbers out on the table if you can. Because now you're starting to fight a little bit harder in the negotiations. The negotiations are a win-win situation. I will ensure that you pay me what I am worth, because here are the skills that I have to support that. And I'll make sure that I earn it. But here's the interesting point, because I'm going to come back to that question of, it's not all about salary. This job over here that paid more, she said, I want this one because it's an easier job. This one over here is really hard and pays lower. I said, tell me more about the growth opportunities here. And she said, well, if I do the right job and I muscle through this, I learn from the bottom up. I'll learn about the business. It was editing and publishing. And she said, I can move from this person who just does all the edits and move into a publishing, a leadership, and a management role. But it's hard. Over here, it's a lot easier, and I'll be able to do that. I said, tell me about the growth opportunity. She said, I don't know. Being paid $41 forever or $35 to start off with growth potential is a whole different story. And you need to know that going in. Because you want to be able to use your experience. You don't want to just start over and say entry level. Everything is a negotiation. Even those coupons that are expired, you can negotiate those. It's worth asking the question. It's worth saying, well, I need to think about that. And if somebody does give you an offer, you still have the right to say, do you mind if I think about that? It's a little less than what I was expecting you to say, or was a little bit less than what I was hoping to hear from you. Do you mind if I sleep on it a little bit? Because I think I have skills, the skill set to be paid a little bit higher than that. Let me think about that. And maybe you're giving them something to think about, so when they come back. A negotiation, by the way, is not everything's in the middle. If everyone ever watches Pawn Shop, they say, oh, what do you want? I want $1,000. Well, I'll only pay you $500. Okay, where are we going to land? $750. That's not negotiation. Negotiations are, I went through a class in negotiations. And they said, here's a $10 bill. You have 1 minute to stand next to this person. And between the two of you, you have to figure out who is going to get whatever split you want. But it can't be 5 and 5. Why is the 1 minute there?
Except the urgency.
Yeah, except the urgency. Home Shopping Network. This deal is only going to be out here for 2 more minutes. Oh, I'm going to go now. I have to have that fake gold jewelry. It's the same thing. So what do? You start talking about yourself. Me, I have to have $10. Because my kids need a new pair of shoes, I need this. What we don't do in that situation is talk about us. Let me tell you what I can do for you. How about I take $6, you take $4, but we'll go out for a soda, and I'll buy. There are different ways around it. You have to think creatively. You have to figure out what can you give them that they don't currently have right now. So that's part of your interviewing preparation is how do you differentiate yourself from anyone else who's showing up on the doorstep? What can you offer? And all of you have a complete diverse background that make you special and who you really are. You just have to let that come out and don't let that question of what's your greatest accomplishment hold you back. It's about to come.